So today I'll be talking about the power of having a speak up culture, having environments where employees' voice is welcome, and it's really good for business.
Wow.
What? Okay, red light means we're on. And we're live. We're live. We're live. We're here.
We're here. We're live.
Live from our basements. Hello, LinkedIn universe. So good to have so many of you here. Hello, everyone. Steven Shadletsky here. Delighted to be with you again. Hello out there and welcome. Usually I start with some sort of jovial quip or something, and I'll try to bring in some humor and some fun. We are joined today by a new friend, Paul Njoroge. Welcome, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you, Shed. Thank you for having me today.
Yes, I'm delighted to have you. And I want to provide some background as to who you are and how we met. Of course, as you join, please do hop into the comments, say hello, let us know where you're joining us from, and even what you're looking forward to or hoping to get out of this conversation today. As some of you know, or many of you know, who have read my book or have followed my work, you know that I have been watching very closely and following the unfolding story of Boeing, not just the 737 MAX, but any new Boeing plane that has come out of their facilities in Renton, Washington, and in Charleston, South Carolina. Headlines continue to come out. There have now been 2 whistleblowers who have been mysteriously dead. One just announced yesterday, and Joshua Dean, and John Barnett as well passed away weeks ago with a apparent suicide. But there's some fishy stuff going on. And very unfortunately and tragically, and as Paul will share, he's suffered a personal loss because of the MAX and losing members of his family, his wife and his 3 children, on the Ethiopian 302 flight, which happened just over 5 years ago in March. As I dove in and began to write about the MAX story as part of Speak Up Culture and the preface of the book, I studied a mutual friend of Paul and mine, Ed Pearson. Ed Pearson is one of the better known whistleblowers at Boeing. And Ed was the one who said, hey, you should meet Paul and you should meet Chris Moore, who happened to be 2 people who have lost family members from MAX accidents, who happen to be in Toronto, where I'm based and Paul is based as well. Paul and Chris both showed up at the book launch that we did in Toronto at the Indigo at Yonge and Eglinton in September, late September. And Paul, you and I had a chance to meet and have a coffee shortly after. We guessed it was around November of 2023. Is that right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. And you shared your story with me, and your perseverance and your service orientation and your determination and your ability to survive, keep going, to contribute to others moved and inspired me. And I thought it would be selfish not to share that. And so I'm delighted to invite you to join me and this community and talk about your story, talk about what Boeing and other airplane manufacturers and airlines and governing bodies like the FAA and the NTSB need to do to get better, as well as what the work you're presently doing that's deriving and giving you a lot of meaning and doing a lot of good in the world as well today. So that's where I want to go. Are you up for it?
Oh, definitely, Shed. Thank you for having me. And I must say that Chris and I were thrilled to come to your book launch and to see you starting the book with a story of the 737 MAX, speaking about Ed Pearson, because what we as the we got recognized as by the CVRA rights, which we had to fight for to be recognized as victims of these crimes, of Boeing crimes. We got recognized as the victims. We've not seen so many people who want to tell the story outside of the aviation experts and the families of the victims. So when we got to see you starting your book with the story of the 737 MAX, we felt that we've done some work, and that work has touched the public. We want information to get to the public about what really happened to our loved ones.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know every day and every moment you think about them, I'm sure it's a mix of joy of honoring their memory, but at the same time, it's painful and it's hard. And so I acknowledge that it is hard for you to speak about your loss, and I thank you for your willingness to do so for us, and to really do what we can to continue to put pressure where we need to, so that we can create and see the change that we so believe in creating. Where leaders and organizations do right by the public and not just by themselves.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So please do hop into the comments, say hello, let us know where you're joining us from, and please add comments, add questions as we go. I do have a couple questions that were written in as well from folks who are joining, so we'll cover those as well. But please get that comments populated, as we'd love to hear from you, where you're joining from, what ideas, comments, and questions and reflections you have. So Paul, are you willing to just sort of set the table and start with your story of what happened to you and your family with the MAX?
Well, I hope I don't break down in the middle and end up leaving this forum today.
Well, if that happens, that is welcome and
Yeah.
and allowed. It's real.
Well, when I speak about my wife and children, I get excited, reliving some of the memories that we created together. From my children showing me that they can stand on one leg, showing me the new dance moves, showing me that they can sing like Rihanna or something like that. So it excites me a lot. So it's it's March 9th, 2019. So they are flying from Toronto. So I've booked, I was the one who planned the entire travel. So I booked the flight, and my mother-in-law is traveling back to Kenya with the kids and my wife. And so at about 8 a.m., they're at the Toronto Pearson Airport. And my wife calls me. She tells me, oh, we've actually passed security. We are now at the gate waiting to board the plane. We chat for a while. Then she tells me, oh, we have to get into the plane. They happen to be the first people to get into the plane. And then she tells me, oh, while they were in the plane, we're just chatting. Then at some point she tells me, oh, you need to speak to Ryan, that is our son, because he's asking for food. I want you to let him know that we are not going to get food now. He'll be getting food once we fly and once we hit the cruising level. So I spoke to him and I explained that to him. He was he was telling me, oh, they're not giving me food. And I can even smell the food in this plane, but they're not giving me any food and I'm hungry. They had woken up too early, for the travel. So later on, he gave the phone to my wife. We ended up chatting, chit-chatting about our lives and all that. Then at some point she told me, oh, we are about to leave. So I requested her to connect via Wi-Fi once she lands in Ethiopia, because I knew she will not have a phone connection, a cellular phone connection. So I requested her to find Wi-Fi and connect and call me to let me know that they're in Ethiopia. So that was a Saturday, March 9th. I was in Bermuda then. I used to work in Bermuda. So I go up into my businesses of the day. I'm working on my computer. I've logged into the flight tracker. I'm tracking the flight from Toronto to Addis Ababa. Then at about 4 p.m., I go to play football with my buddies. And I remember when I was playing football, as I was playing football, I saw a plane high up in the sky passing. And somehow, I'm so, soaked into the playing football, the emotions of playing football and all that. And then all of a sudden, I remember they're flying to Kenya. So when I went back to my house, I checked the flight tracker. It shows me there are about 5 hours to land in Addis Ababa.
Hmm.
So it's about 8 p.m. then Eastern time. And I waited. I didn't want to fall asleep because I was waiting for a call from my wife to tell me that they landed in Ethiopia. So I waited 12 a.m. I saw they landed in Addis Ababa, but she did not call. Then I thought, it was a very short connection period. The connection time was so short. And I'm thinking probably Ruby, our 9 month daughter, was so exhausted, and Carol, my wife, did not find time to call me. And so I decide, okay, but maybe I should go to sleep. And when I wake up, she will be telling me that they're in Kenya, they've met everybody, and they'll be so happy. Then I logged in the other flight ET302 into flight tracker. Then I went to sleep. So then the next day, having slept late, I wake up subconsciously. I'm just gazing at the ceiling. Then all of a sudden, you know, we always have these moments where, I feel a lot of heaviness in me. I can feel, there is something, but I'm so exhausted because I played football and I pushed myself. So my body is sore. So I'm thinking probably that's why I feel like that.
Hmm.
Then all of a sudden, I woke up now to my conscious mind. Oh, my wife and children, they were traveling. I need to find out how they made it. So then I wake up, and the moment I touch my phone, it lights up. And on the screen, there was that Bloomberg headline: Ethiopian flight ET302 crashes 6 minutes after takeoff. And, my body at that particular time entered into a shock, into a fever, and I crumbled to the floor because I think there is some connection. There is some spiritual connection. Seeing the headline, I didn't need to be told that was flight TT302, even though your mind will later on play tricks on you. Maybe there is another flight code. Maybe all the planes that fly from Addis Ababa to Nairobi are all flight 302. So I crumbled to the ground. I don't know after how long I had lost my conscience. Then after a few times, after a while, after some, I don't know how long, I woke up, sat on my bed, and I entered the password on my phone, and I saw so many missed call logs, a number of missed calls from my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law was to pick them up from the airport. So I gathered the courage to call him, and the first thing I tell him is, just wait at the airport. Probably they will be on the other flight. They had a very short connecting period, and they're probably in the next flight. So he thought he would be breaking the bad news to me, but I ended up, the first thing I told him is just wait there. So then at that point, my body has entered into emotional turbulence, and I don't know what to do. I'm just seated on the bed. I start moving around the house, and basically there's nobody there. I'm just alone in the house, and I don't know what to do at all. Eventually went to my computer, and I'm trying to see, I refresh the flight tracker, and I see that they can't show anything about flight ET302. So it started sinking in me. Now my mind is telling me I need to go to Ethiopia. I need to go find my wife and children. Yeah, maybe they're in a hospital somewhere. I need to go to Ethiopia. So, and I think I ended up going into my computer and paying for a flight to fly from Bermuda, New York to Kenya, hoping that once I get to Kenya, then I'll have my mom and dad to take me to Ethiopia. So a few maybe an hour or so later, I get a call from the U.S. consulate in Addis Ababa, and they tell me that you know, Paul, your children were in the plane that crashed today morning. We're sorry to let you know that nobody survived. Kelly was traveling on a U.S. passport, and so they took that step to call me and let me know. A few minutes after that, my brother-in-law calls me and tells me the other flight that was coming from Addis Ababa has landed, and Paul, nobody, we don't have them anymore. I wept. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Paul, for sharing that. And Aaron in the comments here says that he can't imagine the strength it takes to retell the story word for word. Thank you, Aaron. I would agree with that, and thank you, Paul, for your strength and willingness to share this.
Thank you.
What happens next, or what anything sort of more to share there before we transition and start to talk about okay, what changes do we want to see happen? But anything more just sort of on these details here.
The next thing that happens is I start seeing, it so happened that my sister got a word of what happened, and she called a friend of mine. He lives in Halifax. His name is Dennis. He used to be in Bermuda. And so she called him and she told him of what happened. And so Dennis called all other friends I had in Bermuda. I saw them. I started seeing them trickling into these things sometimes come to me in flashes in my mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I remember seeing them coming into my house. So many of them. My world at that time was so male dominated. So it was all males coming in, and some of my former work colleagues, they were coming in as well. And so yeah, and I could see them. I remember seeing them, and they are struggling. They don't know what to tell me. I come from a culture, and traditionally in Africa, African men don't hug, and I can see they're struggling. They know of, some of them know of all the future that I had with my wife and children. Some of them have had me say these words to them, that my children give me life. And without them, without my children, I cannot survive. And so I can see them struggling they don't know to hug me. That's culturally, it's not, African people don't hug, African men don't hug. But they're just there, they're trying to give me hope. I remember some of them talking to me about, we're going to play football again, Paul, and such kind of things. In those circumstances, I think they did so well. I would think so, because I don't know what I would do if I met a person who is going through what I have been going through all along.
Yeah.
So
keep going, please. Yeah.
They plan for they get to know that I have a flight. I have booked a flight to go to Kenya. They ask me what I want to do, and I tell them I just want to go to see my mom and dad.
Yeah. And I know full circle, you just got a call from your dad, who's in Nairobi now, correct?
Yes.
Who's now, your parents are now flying to come see you now in Toronto, which
yes.
you'll see them tomorrow, which is wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
At that point, Paul, did you know, because the Lion Air crash had already happened in October of 2018, did you already know about that and the MAX, or did you sort of have no idea and didn't know about which planes they were on, didn't think about it? Sort of where were you at that point with planes and Boeing?
I did not know that they were flying in a 737 MAX. I had heard of the crash of Lion Air JT 610. I read the news. I actually saw the news trickle in on October 31st when it crashed.
Yeah.
And a few days later, Boeing confirmed to everybody. They spoke with all braveness that that flight was as a result of maintenance issues by Lion Air, which is an airline with a history of maintenance issues.
Mm-hmm.
Once that was spoken, I never got to follow on that part of on those news anymore. So I didn't know that my family was flying in a 737 Max. I didn't know that there was a defective plane out there. And I didn't know anything up until the end of March, because after that, I'm going through, my body cannot even take food from March 10th, and I'm just drinking water. I get to Nairobi, I get to meet my mom and dad. There are so many familiar faces, a big community, some people I went to the university with, some others that I grew up with, my brothers and sisters, they're all there, my extended family. Then we go to, a few days later, we go to Ethiopia. Then I get to see the impact that that plane left in that area, which was a big crater, 30 feet deep. Then, all the weeks that followed, I can't even tell you what I was doing, but I know we did some services to memorialize my family. Then when I came back to Canada, that was sometime on April 1st or so. I started reading. I checked into a hotel. This time when I was coming to Canada, it was different, because every time I came to Toronto, I knew I'm coming to meet my wife and children. This time was so difficult because I was coming and I knew they're no longer there. And my body had entered into, I had put a front of being so strong, such that everything internally was not okay. And I had to take a break in New York because, I felt sick. Then, when I got to Toronto, I checked into a hotel. I couldn't go back to my house. A friend of mine, Phil, and his family, they would come to see me. Phil would come to see me. Phil is a friend of mine who lives in Oakville. So he would come to see me at the hotel. He had actually moved everything out of my house into a storage, just because he never wanted me to go back there. So I started, I started watching the TV, and I would see news coming in. Then on April 4th, that's when I saw the former CEO of Boeing, Dennis Muhlenberg. He spoke, and he spoke about this issue being a foreign pilot error issue. And it was at that time when I got the courage now to read every piece of article, and I got to know that on March, around a few days after the crash, he had come out and he had said that they own the problem, that Boeing owns the problem, they know the issue, and they'll do everything to fix the issue.
Yeah.
And then I wondered, why is he changing the narrative a few weeks later? Then I got to see it's the same thing that happened with with JT610. So I get to know that there was a system, MCAS, within the plane that would make the plane have a mind of its own, nosedive to the ground at a speed close to the speed of sound. Nobody would survive that. So I started getting some anger within me, and I grew up in an extended family. My grandmother was a person who speaks up. She grew up at a time when women, in the hierarchy of who should be speaking up in the society, she was ranked down there, but not my grandmother. My grandmother used to speak up. So I'm a speaking up person. So and also, the in the core of a human being, the common characteristics of a human being is a human being wants to be listened to. They want to be heard, and they want to be seen. And that is my wife. My wife wanted to be heard and to be seen. My children were like that. So I needed their voice to be heard. Without me, nobody would ever even know who they are. They'll just be a number of people who are flying in that plane. So I needed to take action. So I started now reading more and more, getting to know what happened, getting to know about that the Allied Pilots Association or the pilots in the US did not even know about MCAS before the crash of JT610.
Yep.
So then I got to know that the US was hesitant to ground the plane when all this happened. Canada was actually the second last country as well. So, during that period, I got to meet with the families of the other victims, and I found out that most of them were as angered as I was. And so we decided to take action.
So, thank you, Paul. I just feel so viscerally strong with you about the voice of your children and wife who are now voiceless, but you're channeling their voice, rightfully so. So thank you. And it is loud and clear. Just for sort of anyone who's joining with us now, who's with us, the sort of Paul, I think it might make sense to provide a little background on sort of the MAX and what's happened with this thing, as well as Boeing, because I'd also love to have a conversation on what's happened since, and what are you calling for? What's the community calling for? But just a bit of background. So I believe it was in the late 2000s, maybe 2000. I'm just trying to see if I can get my math right. I believe it was 2008, but don't quote me on this. American Airlines calls Boeing and says, we're about to put in a big order with Airbus for the A321neo.
Yes.
Either make us a new single aisle plane that can compete with the fuel efficiency of the A321neo, or we're going to buy the A321neo. Boeing says, give us 7-8 years. And American Airlines says you have 5. And so as opposed to making the right, I would say, business and engineering decision to say, no, we'll need 7 to 8 years. If you need to buy planes with Airbus first, go for it. We'll make a great plane and you'll come back and buy from us. Boeing cuts corners. And Boeing takes a plane that had not been substantially updated since its original design in 1967 and gives it a facelift. They put bigger, newer engines, put it further forward, change the aerodynamics of the plane to be less desirable. Because of that, the plane tends to pitch up, which is why they then put in this thing called the MCAS, the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, which pitches it down so it doesn't stall. Correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So not only does Boeing design a worse plane, a plane that is not aerodynamically sound, they now have tons of orders for these things coming in. They limit, they say that as long as you fly a 737-800, which is the old version, you're automatically recertified. You just have to take 2 hours of training on an iPad, even though it's a substantially different airplane. There are all these factors, including a culture that is so clearly prioritizing profit and output over safety and quality. As evidenced by Ed Pearson and many others blowing the whistle, saying these planes we're putting out are not safe. As it turns out, and as Boeing continues to be under the microscope, not only are the new Maxes unfit and not great planes, there's now pressure and uncertainty on Dreamliners as well because of the overall culture at Boeing that is prioritizing output over employee well-being, as well as the quality of the planes that are going out. Am I capturing this well so far? And anything else you would add?
Very well. You've summarized it very well. Yeah, I must say that America and America, the people of America, the airlines in the US, in North America, they love Boeing. Everybody loves Boeing. It's a company that has revolutionized the world. And when they started making planes, it was a new era in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about all these issues, we're not here to shame them. What we want them to, what we are just picking up so that these people can pick up, our words, and so that they can return to a culture of manufacturing safe planes.
Yeah.
So they can, instead of focusing on profit maximization and the stock pumpage, I can tell you that when all this happened and they want to compete with Airbus, now the investors were happy, the Wall Street was happy. I am a person in investments, and I can tell you one of my colleagues who love the stock. It's not one of those stocks that I was looking at. It's not a stock that I was covering, but he loved Boeing, and he would talk to me about how the stock has gone up. And I remember as all these orders were coming in, as Boeing continues to produce these planes, production, production, production. The stock market, which moves based on expectations. So the investors were expected that within this period, they will have sold so many planes. And airlines were just ordering these planes in large numbers because they were cheaper than Airbus. The other thing is that Airbus is known to take time to manufacture a plane. Their orders take so long, and airlines don't want that. But Boeing, because they were cutting corners, they knew that they could produce so many planes and deliver so many to their customers. And so the stock kept on going. Every piece of news, every time we had an earning calls, the expectation was that the guidance, there is something we call the earnings guidance for the next period, for the next quarter and another quarter. It was always up. And what that makes the stock, basically investors like hearing that. They will just buy the stock and eventually it moves way high. And that's what happened during that period, the period 2013, since they started, I think that's when they started the manufacturing of that plane. That's when now the stock picked up. By 2019, they had done so many equity repurchase because they had cash to burn. Boeing, this is a company that you sometimes you look at all this and it annoys me, it angers me so much because of how much money they had, and they are thinking instead of focusing on quality, we will just get some software engineers to write these MCAS codes and put it in within this aircraft, and it's gonna control the aircraft because basically they wanted MCAS to fly in circumstances where the plane, the nose is way high. They want MCAS to control the airplane, to fly the airplane, basically. So they're cutting corners in all ways, and at the same time they're just burning money, because when you do equity repurchase, you're just saying to the world out there, to the investors, we have a lot of money and we don't know what to do with the money, so we cannot put money back into investment. So into investing in quality in our company, what we want to do is to just burn the money. And so investors want to hear that the stock will continue to go up. So basically, now from my side, I see that as stock pumpage. That's what we call stock pumping, because obviously these executives within Boeing, they are paid based on stock options. And so the higher the stock goes, the higher the richer they are. And that's what they were focusing on. Profit maximization for the company, getting rich for the individuals within the company.
Yeah. Yes. I have so much more to say about that. I just want to highlight a couple comments here. One from Deborah: Paul, we continue to stand with you. Absolutely. Thank you. And I'm told from Ale, from my team, that LinkedIn user is Ed Pearson. So Ed Pearson, who's a well-known whistleblower and has whistleblown in Congress and continues to be an amazing safety advocate for the aviation industry, shares. Paul, thank you for your courage and ongoing advocacy for aviation safety. Shed, thank you for having the important discussion. Thank you, Ed, for your courage, your leadership, and your friendship. You're wonderful. So, Paul, this also goes back further, because now we're sort of shifting to, okay, what are we calling upon Boeing, airline manufacturers, airlines, as well as governing bodies like the FAA and the NTSB and governments to do? So if we go further back, I give the origins of this change at Boeing back to when there was an acquisition of McDonnell Douglas.
Yeah.
In the early 90s, Boeing actually purchases McDonnell Douglas, which is a struggling commercial airline manufacturer as well.
Yeah.
And for some reason, because the fashion of capitalism at the point was Gordon Gekko, Jack Welch, greed is good. The purpose of business is to maximize profit and shareholder value, which is BS. The purpose of business is to deliver value to your end users, right?
For sure.
And when you do so, your end users reward you with loyalty, with purchase, with profit, and shareholder value is that result, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Over a long term, you can pump it up as in a inflationary way, as Boeing's done.
Yeah.
But Boeing puts all of the McDonnell Douglas leaders in charge at Boeing, which makes no sense. They move corporate headquarters from Seattle, from Washington, next to manufacturing and R&D, and move it up to Chicago in a separate corporate headquarters. I now believe the Boeing headquarters is in Virginia, if I'm not mistaken.
Arlington, Virginia.
Arlington, Virginia. So there's this separation between business and corporate and R&D and engineering from a firm, from a company whose success from its beginning has been engineering, safety, quality, R&D.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And so now you have a company that since the mid 90s, to your point, has every decision along the way from then up until now, it seems, has prioritized profit and and stock buyback over innovation, R&D, engineering, quality.
Yeah.
And it's now been folks like you, like Ed, like Sam Salahpour, like John Barnett, like Joshua Dean, may they rest in peace, those last two, who are speaking up, saying there are issues here, and these are planes that I wouldn't fly on, let alone put other people on, that it's a danger to the public. Now, Boeing can turn this around. And so my question to you is, what is your message? What is our message to Boeing, to airplane manufacturers, as well as airlines, and governing bodies as well?
Well, you spoke of Ed, and you spoke of Joshua Dean. There is also John Burnett, and I'm with their families, and to know that actually their death, especially John Burnett, it's still under police investigation, and even though they say that it's apparent suicide, where basically we know that if it was apparent suicide, there won't be a police investigation. And now we have Joshua Dean, who just died 2 days ago. And
from a sudden illness, a 45-year-old with a sudden illness.
For sure, yeah. So I look at these people and the whistleblowers, Ed Pearson, as these are leaders I admire because of being so brave to come out. And when I speak about Boeing, I don't have anything to lose. I don't have my wife and children anymore. I don't have my entire family. But they have a lot to lose, but they are so brave to speak up. Ed Pearson, he left Boeing before the crash of Lion Air JT610 because he felt that I don't want to be part of the company that is making defective planes and continuing to allow them to fly. So
I'll just add in, despite his very best efforts to do everything in his power to speak up to all the right people, provide all the right data and information. I know Ed is hard on himself because he wanted to do better to help avoid these issues, these catastrophes from happening. But I want to say Ed has done and continues to do everything in his absolute power to try to make things better and safe.
How admirable, honestly, and I feel like they've given us so much courage because we don't have I can read so far, where I can read so much, and I'm a good reader, but I don't have the engineering wordings, and I don't know the technicalities within an aircraft. But Ed Pearson, we have Joe, that, he works with Joe as well, like from a Boeing engineer. They make it easier for us because they can explain these things to us. Ed was actually told The last statement he got from his manager was that Boeing is not a non-profit organization. Boeing is not government. It's there to maximize profits. Basically, it was meant to mean that. So the FAA was a captured regulator. Basically the system that they run, FAA and Boeing, it's basically Boeing policing itself. Boeing manages itself. The FAA, and that's why in my testimony in July of 2019 before the Congress, I said that the FAA ought to return to be an agency that administrates what Boeing is doing, because basically they've not been doing that. I doubt they even knew what MCAS was at that particular time. So what we want to see as the families, as the victims, what we want to see is that the FAA regulates Boeing, and the FAA needs to have the resources, people who are competent enough and in large numbers who can go into Boeing and ask for documentation, have the documentation provided to them so that they can review those documents, and they can at that point tell Boeing, we will not allow these, but we can allow these. The agencies outside of the FAA, outside of what Canada was doing back then, it was just validating what the FAA was giving them. Now, what we want to see the Canadians doing, we want them to look at what Boeing, they have to look at what they have been given by the FAA, but they also they need to have experts who go into Boeing as well and try to validate that everything that the FAA has done is sufficient enough to make that plane safer for their citizens.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What's interesting now is it's way too many years late. But we're now seeing, because of the recent issues with the door plug on the Alaska Airlines plane, there's been increased scrutiny from public as well as the FAA. So now the FAA is apparently in facility, watching and in theory slowing things down and making them better, hopefully. Yeah. We're now seeing something interesting as well, Paul, which is airlines who depended upon these MAX planes and new deliveries of these MAX planes, because Boeing is actually being forced to slow down now because of FAA's oversight. You're now seeing routes from airlines being canceled. Certain airlines are now not being able to fly certain routes. I actually think this is a positive thing because it's forcing Boeing's hand to actually make improvements. And if these airlines aren't able to service what they need, they might make a different choice, whether that's with Airbus or actually have Boeing do what they should have done, which is make a new plane in the first place and not just make add a facelift to a plane from 1967. So I'm not pleased of how we got here, but it seems like to the inconvenience of consumers still and of airlines, but it seems like there might be some positive things happening. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree? Do you push back? What do you think on that?
Well, sometimes I wonder, because the FAA has a service difficulty reporting system, and so many airlines log into that system to report issues with the aircrafts. Basically, how this works is that the pilot will have to report to their repair station, and they will have to report any issue that they felt in the plane. And then the service, the repair station, which is approved by the FAA, will have to go into that system, there's SDRS system, and report on those issues. But there are so many issues, especially with respect to the 737 MAX plane. Alaska Airlines alone, since the start of 2021, they've logged in more than 1,300 issues with respect to the 737 MAX planes. Yeah. Now, comparably, they have also logged in issues with respect to Airbus A320neo, but just 25 issues. So it just tells you that the 737 MAX is inherently defective. It's inherently defective. And so this is a plane that ought to be axed. We call it axe, the MAX. That is what we coined as the families of the victims. And that came actually from Ralph Nader, a consumer advocate for so many years, a former presidential aspirant who lost his grandniece in the crash of ET-302. So that plane ought to be taken out completely.
I agree.
Now, we've heard from the whistleblowers, and they testified before the Senate just a week ago or so, and they spoke about the issues with the 787 Dreamliners as well. And so there is a culture within Boeing. It's that culture that ought to change. That culture, the culture of the shut-up culture, that's what I call it, that ought to change. We have a system run by the FAA, which is the ODA system. And so what happens is that the employees within Boeing are the ones who are actually reviewing the work that is done by engineers. They have some people within Boeing, and then they'll have to report back to the FAA. Now, the thing is, what has been found out, the ODA committee has found out is that the employees are fearful of reporting issues.
Mm-hmm.
They do not have, they've not been given an environment where they can report and feel that there won't be retaliation. We have whistleblowers who've spoken about some retaliation from their managers. So that is the culture. It's the culture within Boeing that ought to change for it to improve the internal controls framework and come up and be able to produce quality products.
Yep.
Yeah.
The saying used to be that if it ain't Boeing, I'm not going. And now I think we're calling for axe the MAX. This is not a well-made plane on top of a culture that does not prioritize safety, that seemingly is prioritizing profit and output at the risk of quality and safety.
For
and
sure.
So Boeing can turn it around, but they need to do it with effective, real ethical leadership.
Oh, for sure, yeah. At this point, I say it's a rebuttable presumption that every Boeing plane is defective. As a frequent flyer, you just have to rebut that. You have to do your research, you have to read, you have to speak to whistleblowers, you have to read what they're saying, and for you to know whether you will just rebut that and fly in those planes.
Yep. Yeah. And as someone who flies almost every week, I have not flown on a MAX in, I think about 2 years, and I continue to avoid it. I've taken 2 flights as opposed to one to avoid it because it's okay. We've got about 10 minutes left, Paul, and I'd love to see if we can end on more of an uplifting note, because I know that there is so much that you continue to do to honor the legacy and the wonderful, beautiful lives of your mother-in-law, of your wife, and of your 3 children. And so can you just share with us what you're up to now? What are you doing? What continues to give you hope and strength to keep going, to persevere and to serve?
Well, I go through periods of emotional turbulence. There are times when I wake up and feel like, I can do this. At the end of the day, I am I'm the face of my wife and children. I want to continue on going because they have to be, without me, they would be forgotten. Mm-hmm. There are days when I just feel horrible and I feel like my life is teetering at the edge. I have I can tell you that I have better days than bad days in the current period, but these periods always interchange. So so what I did is I started an organization, a nonprofit organization. And this is because my wife always spoke to me about some of her friends in Kenya who she grew up with, and they were brighter than her, she would say. But they didn't go through high school. And so they got lost into the life over there got married young, and eventually led a life that was not desirable. And Carol would go every time she went back to her community, to her village. She would tell me, I saw this person, and I was not happy to see her in that situation. So I thought the best thing that I can do. This was something that was in me as well as when Carol was alive. Our parents sometimes would ask us to support certain people, just those one-off supporting people. Then I thought, well, I can extend this support, but I will do this as an organization in the name of my wife and children, and so that I can keep their legacy going. So what we do, we have various projects, and we aim to do more projects in the future. But the inaugural project is the scholarship project, which is high school in Kenya is paid, and some parents don't have the financial resources to pay for their children, and so we pay school fees for these kids, those transitioning from elementary school to high school. That's what the organization is doing currently. So we started, our first year was the academic year that started in 2020, January of 2023. Academic year in Kenya starts in January. So the academic year that started in January of 2023, we got 15 students in the scholarship. The academic year that started this year, January this year, we have 25. So we have 40 students in total going through high school with everything paid by my nonprofit organization. Yeah.
Nice. And that's beautiful. I love that. And I know, Paul, when we met in November, I introduced you to the term for impact or organization. I'm not a fan of not-for-profit, because no one wakes up and says, let's not make profit today. There's evident impact that you're having. So it's a social cause or a for impact or organization. And I know you were just as well in Ethiopia for the monument for the 5-year anniversary. Is that right?
Yes. In Ethiopia, we have where the plane crashed, and for a long time, this is a site that haunts me many times, because then I think about this plane coming down. The thought that the terror that my wife had. This is our end. She's there with her mother. All our children, and she can see that this is the end. That it's something that I struggle with, the 6 minutes that plane took in the air. And then what that thought takes me to the crash site as I found it. So it's something that I struggled with for a long time. And so I joined this committee that works with the Boeing community arm, Ethiopian Airlines. We do have other Blake Emergency, other stakeholders, and the contractors, engineers, architects as well, to make sure that we have a physical, or what we call a physical monument or a memorial park. It's a memorial park that's being built there. It's ongoing, and we are hoping that it's going to be done by October this year, or by June, July, which is June is next month. We expect that it's going to be done by then, which is it's going to be a good way to honor our loved ones. But for the community, we've made a lot of impact. For the community around the crash site, we've built boreholes, we've constructed schools, we've because that community was a drought-stricken place. We did boreholes for them. There were some schools that were completely dilapidated. We built schools for them as well. So the community has had, they felt also they do. I can tell you that community actually do agree with us. To this date, they do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's evident, Paul, that you do so much to serve and support others. There's a question here from Deborah, and putting you on the spot, and I have some ideas, but Deborah asks, how can we support you, Paul? What support are you looking for? What can you ask our public here, our listeners, to help you and to advance this cause as well?
Thanks, Debbie. Actually, Debbie, from her name, I can see that she's from Kenya. So yeah, that's, there is a lot that we can do together, and that's in partnership. Um, with my organization, I would want to do eventually, and this is one of the key projects that I'm looking forward to doing as well. We have some places in those communities in Kenya where you do have kids that do not have physical classrooms. And my organization would want to do some classrooms over there. But some of these things are politically influenced. There are a lot of political influence over there. So I would wish that I would partner with some people who can help me steer through the political arena and be able to do these projects. Now, we do have other projects that we do here in Canada as well. At the school where my children were attending, we are doing a memorial garden for them. And many times this is done by parents and teachers who volunteer to do it. Yeah, if I could have a community, people who are close to me to rally behind me and to help out in doing such kind of activities, that would be so helpful. Because also my organization looks to do, which I have done such kind of projects here in Canada as well, school feeding projects. So I have thought about so many projects that we can do. My son was a footballer, a soccer player. When I say footballer, it's soccer player. So I would want to see young people who are not able to afford to go to soccer camps when they are they are out of school in the summer. My organization would want to gather those children and help them go through the soccer camps, such like things. But then I think that you would have so many ideas as well, and that's where all the support comes from. So many ideas of the things that we can do together. Yeah.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah.
A couple more comments here. My friend Cheryl says supporting the success of the community is a beautiful, and communities, because you're doing it in many communities, both locally in Canada, abroad, in Ethiopia, and in Kenya as well. Supporting the success of the communities is a beautiful and courageous way to honor your family. And I agree, Cheryl. And Ale from my team has also put in, Paul, your website, paulsfund.com, where you can learn more and see how you can get involved and contribute as well to all the worthwhile efforts that Paul is helping to lead to better the world, to better aviation safety, and as well to honor the legacy of his family. Love it.
All right.
Yeah, Paul, anything else? Yes.
No, the website is still under construction. You'll see that. I did the website. I structured the website myself. And I have my cousin who is always helping with that website. So it's always ongoing. So you'll get to see that. But it's an actual website. It's working for us.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And Deborah says she's going to reach out, which I encourage anyone who wants to learn more and support Paul and his worthwhile efforts to please do so. Paul, I mean, I think it comes from the both of us when we look at, one, I am so grateful for you coming on and sharing this again. I know it is both painful and meaningful, as well as creates some hope and some legacy in having this conversation. I'm here to support you. I'm so inspired by you. I know that both you and I call upon Boeing to do their job and to build planes that are done so in a responsible, ethical, right way for all airline manufacturers, and to any industry where what you do has the impact to potentially harm human life. You have a responsibility to do it right and to do it well. For airlines and purchasers, those who buy from suppliers, buy ethically, buy right. Do not put undue pressure on your suppliers to do things that they should not do, and hold them to a standard. And for regulatory bodies and agencies, do your job as well. keep the public safe, so that we don't have to have more people go through tragedies like you've unfortunately had to go through. Paul, such an honor and joy to have you here. I'm grateful that you're local in Toronto. I'm here to support you forever. Any closing words just to help close out this conversation today?
Thank you so much, Shed. I do admire your work because, like I said, every human being ought to be listened to hard, and every human being wants to be seen as well. So basically, that's what you help people realize. That's what you help leaders realize, and that is the only way we can improve the communities that we serve in. Thank you so much.
Love it, Paul. I agree. Thank you for continuing to have the courage to speak up, to honor the legacy of your family members, and to make it safe and worth it for others to do so as well. We will see you soon, and thanks again for joining us. And thanks to all those who tuned in, whether live or on the recording. Take care and enjoy the time with your mom and dad.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye. Okay.